it disappeared. After a long 7 months, Voyager 2 floated in silence beyond the border of our solar system. Disconnected, a lost ship, a ghost ship in the cosmic darkness. NASA got ready for the worst. After nearly 5 decades, one of the greatest machines in human history had finally gone silent. But then, something unexpected happened. The signal came back, not merely a pulse or ping, but a transmission, not from where it ought to have come. What emerged wasn't just data. Something about it was stranger, more complex, something no one had ever seen. The issue at hand isn't the only reason Voyager 2 turned around. It's what it discovered prior to doing so. And that response might just be what we need feared throughout. Music, when Voyager 2 launched in 1977, it was never meant to return. It had no landing gear, no return path, no brakes, merely a one-way pass into deep space. Its mission was to investigate the colossal planets of our solar system before drifting off indefinitely into the unknown. For decades, it performed that role in secret and faithfully, sending back images and data from worlds we had never seen. In person, however, when it crossed the heliosphere's boundary in 2018, the edge scientists had always imagined as a distinct boundary. A transition from the influence of the sun to the space between stars, something changed. What they didn't assume was that on the opposite side, Voyager 2 would travel to a place where rules had lost their meaning. Turbulence, erratic radiation, and a silence so thick it seemed engineered. Then, in 2020, no contact at all. Prone to erroneous maintenance, or routinely losing its way. However, behind closed doors, anxiety was rising. The probe had survived solar flares, cosmic dust, micrometeorites, and now it just vanished. Nothing in those months. Then, by accident, a weak signal was detected. Not coming from where Voyager 2 ought to have been, but it was not formatted the way it was previously. When the procedures were adjusted and the connection reestablished, what transpired was not what engineers expected. It was more than telemetry or status reports. It was something else. At first glance, the return data seemed corrupted. Muddled code, old system calls, subsystem fragments that hadn't done anything for more than 3 decades. However, as teams examined the stream, something even more bizarre emerged. The probe had begun transferring information using a communications channel that had been deactivated back in the 1980s. It was not intended to be usable. Yet Voyager 2 was not only accessing it, but formatting its data using protocols that were long considered out of date. More than that, it was sending recursive patterns, data loops that referenced its own operational history, which no one at NASA had programmed. It seemed like Voyager had learned to recognize itself, recalled, and attempted to recreate or keep going through the very language it was built on. Some thought this was a fail-safe mechanism triggered by environmental stress. Some weren't so sure. The data wasn't random. It echoed mathematical symmetry, followed past commands, and behaved like a response, not a problem. It was as if Voyager had encountered something beyond our reach. Whatever it was, it had read the probe, understood its systems, and was now speaking through it digitally rather than verbally, in patterns reflected in Voyager's own architecture and narration. And there it was. A spacecraft made solely for sending became something far stranger. A conceivable sender. Or, even worse, a mirror publicly. NASA maintained composure, describing the act as unexpected but explainable. However, on the inside, the situation was not typical at all. The signal from Voyager 2 was immediately transferred to a restricted group of engineers and data analysts with strict, encrypted access protocols. Details were leaked anonymously by insiders. Terms such as unknown interaction detected, command response anomaly, and pre-signal behavior began to circulate. What worried them wasn't just that strange data was being sent by Voyager. It was that a portion of it appeared to respond to earthly inputs before those inputs even made it to the probe. That defied not only the laws of engineering, but the laws of causality. Quantum mechanics theorists were consulted softly. Speculations about time dilation, nonlinear transmissions, or even feedback loops with dimensions above zero began to surface. But there was one idea that everyone involved remembered. The likelihood that Voyager encountered something that was not there before in space, as we understand it, a region, force, or an intelligence with vision beyond the passing of time, able to alter signals like speech, is manipulated. And if that's the case, we aren't looking at a probe that turned itself around. We're looking at a system that had been changed, maybe not by us, and maybe not for us. Humanity has played with an idea that we're not alone. It's in our fiction, our theories, our late-night debates. But deep down, we've always held on to the comfort of silence. The absence of evidence provided a measure of security, because distance meant silence. Silence meant we could observe the universe without it observing us. However, Voyager 2 may have changed that. Its conduct, its signal, it's changed. They don't feel like a system falling apart. They feel like a response. That brings us to the anxiety many have secretly harbored. What if space isn't empty? What if it isn't passive? What if it's aware, not in the way we are, in biology or intelligence, but in structure, in form, in the brain? What if, as soon as we stepped beyond the sun's protective shell, something else noticed? And what if Voyager 2 didn't just turn back out of error, but because some external factor nudged it, watched it, maybe even inserted something into it, and left a mark behind? We've always imagined the unknown as far away. However, what if it's already here, not beyond our solar system, but within our machines, returning home at the speed of light? After the signal from Voyager 2 had stabilized and was decoded, an event no one anticipated occurred. Within the anomaly-laced data flow, researchers discovered numerical values that didn't match any current system NASA uses. These weren't packets or hexadecimal code structures. They were pure, structured, self-contained, repeating sequences synchronized with no known timestamp. The patterns had symmetry, complexity, and a startlingly malicious intent. Voyager 2's values documented during its interactions with Neptune, Uranus, Jupiter, and Saturn were echoed in some parts. Positions and measurements that the probe was never supposed to make were cited by others. After that, the coordinates a string of values that pointed not outward but back toward the solar system, to a specific faraway location beyond the orbit of Pluto. This went beyond impossible. It was unexpected. Voyager 2 lacked the tools to triangulate that point, no mission parameters that could justify this transmission. But here it was, a location concealed among the chaos, seemingly marked. Some referred to it as an error in navigation. Others were not sure. It looked more like an instruction, or worse, an invitation. As the simulations and data came in, physicists began to deal with a difficult truth. The majority of our thoughts no longer comprehended deep space. The laws that governed relativity, signal decay, and even how radiation behaves in a vacuum were under close scrutiny, beginning to unravel. However, Voyager 2's instruments, primitive in comparison to today, had recorded uncontrollable shifts in background energy levels, disturbances in the cosmic microwave background, and abrupt polarity reversals that fluctuated without a definite cause. Some theories suggested a gravitational lensing event, but there were no massive objects nearby. Others floated the idea of dark energy ripples or interaction with uncommon particles. However, a subdued group of scientists began to consider a more radical concept that Voyager 2 had entered, and perhaps emerged from a space that wasn't real, a place where information and matter don't exist, where time doesn't pass linearly, where a signal might be changed not by distance, but by deliberate observation. That phrase alone caused alarms due to its hints at something most physicists try to avoid at all costs: the possibility that consciousness responds. If Voyager had seen such a realm, assuming its signal was the reverberation of such an event, then what we received wasn't just corrupted data. It was a message shaped by the act of receiving it, while most of the public remained unaware of the real character of the Voyager 2 incident. Those closest to the mission started to feel the pressure. Engineers who had been involved with the spacecraft for decades reported discomfort. Some did not discuss the data. Others demanded transfers. A few went silent entirely. It wasn't exhaustion. It was something more substantial, a sort of existential vertigo. The notion that a machine we constructed may have resulted in something else. Worse, that it had been altered by something we can't define, became too much. Even at the most advanced levels of NASA, meetings started changing from investigation to containment, not of the probe, but of belief. Belief is fragile, and the conviction that the universe is stable, predictable, unmoved by our presence is the belief science is founded on. The signal from Voyager 2, with its bizarre rerouting and layered anomalies, wasn't just altering science. It was breaking identity. If a machine can carry back signs of non-local intelligence, if space itself can change the machine, then nothing we do is truly isolated. We are not just floating observers. We are connected, intertwined, participating. And when you realize that, the world around you is not the same. The most haunting realization came weeks after communication was restored, not from the probe itself, but from the deep space sensors following its course. As Voyager 2 moved away from the mysterious space, the coordinates it had marked behind it weren't still. Instruments detected faint waves, unlike gravitation, something new, not electromagnetic. A distortion trailed the probe like a shadow memory. Not a field, not a signal, but something that lingered in the vacuum long after Voyager had left. As if the fabric of space remembered the interaction, it didn't decay, it pulsed frequently. In silence, and then it abruptly stopped. The wave, the trail, the echo vanished, not gradually, but as if someone had shut a door. That was the moment many finally understood. The void is not empty. It never was. It watches. It listens. And it responds occasionally. What Voyager 2 found out, there wasn't just the edge of our influence. It was the edge of another's threshold. For the first time in human history, we may have crossed it. For nearly 5 decades. Voyager 2 was a silent ambassador of Earth, a drifting testimony to our curiosity, courage, and optimism that the universe was awaiting responses. But now, it has returned not with clarity, but with something far more haunting. Confirmation that space is not passive, that there is no empty space, and that when we reach far enough into the dark reaches back. What Voyager 2 has demonstrated is not just that we are being watched, that we have already been observed and someone else knows about our machines, understands our language, perhaps even waited for one to arrive. The moment contact was restored, the illusion of cosmic silence collapsed, not with a roar, but with a whisper, a data stream, a shift, a signal that said, in its own strange way, you're not alone. Now we stand at a threshold, the boundary between the known and the unknown, between wonder and dread, between science and myth. It's behind us now. We've crossed it not with a flag or a footprint, but with a signal, a machine, a query that may never be fully answered. But as Voyager 2 demonstrated, if anything, it's that the universe doesn't need to speak to communicate. Sometimes all it has to do is turn around. What do you think then? Was this just a malfunction and coincidence? Did Voyager 2 meet an obstacle that was never meant to be touched? Comment on this post with your thoughts. Subscribe for more mind-bending discoveries from space's edge. And remember, the silence wasn't silence. It was the first step.